Night settles early over coastal Queensland in June 1943. Low cloud drifts inland from the Coral Sea, flattening the horizon, softening the line between air and earth. Rain moves in uneven sheets, light but persistent, the kind that blurs depth and steals contrast. To the west of Mackay, the land rises gently, fields, scrub, and shallow ridgelines barely distinguishable in the dark. At 10:30 p.m., a twin-engine transport aircraft descends through that weather. Its navigation lights glow faintly against the cloud base. Inside the cockpit, instruments dominate the field of view: altimeter, airspeed indicator, vertical speed. Steady, unremarkable. The engines run smoothly. There is no sign of mechanical distress, no warning, no urgency. The aircraft is a Douglas C-47, the military derivative of the DC-3. By 1943, it is already a veteran of global service, reliable, forgiving, trusted. Thousands are flying every day across war zones and training routes alike. Crews know its handling intimately. It is not an aircraft that surprises pilots easily. This flight is inbound to Mackay. The destination lies ahead, somewhere beyond the weather, beyond the blackened coastline and the unlit terrain inland. There is no modern approach lighting, no ground-based precision guidance. Navigation relies on radio bearings, charts, timing, and experience. In conditions like these, the margin between safe descent and unseen terrain is thin. The aircraft continues down. Altitude is reduced in stages, as procedures of the era allow. The crew expects a break clear of clouds soon, to pick up ground references, perhaps the faint glow of the town or the darker outline of the coast. Nothing appears. The wind shifts slightly. Rain taps hard against the fuselage. The cockpit remains calm, methodical. There are 40 people on board. They are not mentioned in any checklist. They do not affect performance calculations or fuel flow. They sit behind the cockpit door, service personnel, returning from leave, moving between postings in a country at war. Their presence adds weight to the aircraft, but not enough to change its handling. The C-47 descends as it always does. Outside, the land continues to rise. At Baker's Creek, a few miles short of Mackay Aerodrome, the terrain lifts gently. No cliffs, no dramatic peaks. In daylight, it would appear harmless. At night, in rain, beneath low cloud, it is indistinguishable from empty space. The aircraft does not deviate sharply. There is no last-second maneuvering, no violent change in attitude. The engines maintain power. Control is never lost. The descent continues until, without warning, the ground meets the aircraft. Impact comes abruptly, not with fire in the sky or an explosion heard miles away, but with a sudden end to controlled flight. Metal meets earth. Motion stops. In wartime Australia, news travels slowly. Details are scarce. The crash site lies in darkness and rain, away from major roads, away from immediate witnesses. By morning, the scale of the loss will become clear. 40 lives, gone in a single moment, in what will become the deadliest aircraft accident in Australian history. But at this point, on descent, in cloud, engines running, nothing about the flight appears extraordinary. That ordinariness is what makes it dangerous. By mid-1943, Australia is fully absorbed into a global war that has reached its northern approaches. The rapid expansion of military operations in the Pacific has transformed the country's aviation system. Civil and military flying are no longer separate worlds. Airfields built for mail routes and passenger services now serve troop movements, training flights, and logistical transfers. Aircraft fly more often, in worse weather, with narrower margins. The Royal Australian Air Force has grown at a pace few institutions could sustain without strain. Crews are trained quickly. Procedures are standardized where possible, Improvise where necessary. Aircraft are reliable, but navigation infrastructure lags behind demand. Radar is in its infancy. Instrument landing systems do not yet exist in Australia. At many regional airfields, night approaches rely on basic radio aids and pilot judgment. Mackay Aerodrome is one such field. Located on Queensland's central coast, Mackay is not a frontline base, but it plays a vital role in the movement of personnel between southern training centers and northern operational zones. Flights arrive and depart around the clock. Runway lighting is limited. Surrounding terrain is modest but uneven, rising inland from the coast in shallow ridges and low hills. In clear weather, approaches are straightforward. In rain and cloud, they demand caution. The aircraft assigned to this flight is a Douglas C-47A. Derived from the civilian DC-3, it has become the backbone of Allied air transport. Its reputation is built on stability, predictable handling, and mechanical robustness. Crews trust it. Commanders rely on it. It is forgiving of small errors, up to a point. The flight on the night of the 13th of June, 1943 is not unusual in purpose. It is carrying service personnel returning from leave to their units. In wartime, such movements are constant and largely invisible to the public. These are not combat sorties. They do not carry priority markings or special planning. They are scheduled, routine, and expected to arrive without incident. The crew assigned to the aircraft are trained transport pilots. Their experience reflects the era, solid but formed under pressure. Wartime training emphasizes competence and adaptability over perfection. Instrument flying skills exist, but they are not yet the dominant discipline they will become in later decades. Visual reference remains central to approach and landing, especially at smaller airfields. Weather reporting in 1943 is limited by both technology and geography. Observations are intermittent. Forecasts are broad. Real-time updates are rare once an aircraft is airborne. A crew approaching Mackay at night must interpret incomplete information, cloud-based estimates, surface winds, recent reports, then decide how to proceed. On this night, conditions are deteriorating. Low cloud settles over the region. Rain reduces visibility. The boundary between sky and land becomes indistinct. For an aircraft ascending toward an unlit airfield, this creates a specific hazard: controlled flight into terrain. The aircraft may be functioning perfectly. The crew may believe they are clear of obstacles. The danger lies not in loss of control, but in loss of awareness. There is no formal concept of CFIT in 1943. Accidents are categorized by outcome, not by underlying pattern. The idea that a serviceable aircraft, under full control, could be flown unintentionally into the ground is understood in fragments, but not yet codified into training doctrine or protective systems. This is the environment in which the Baker's Creek flight operates. The passengers, 40 in total, are not briefed on weather or approach procedures. They trust the system implicitly. In wartime, trust is a necessity. Flights depart and arrive every day. Most land safely. The absence of prior accidents on a route can create a quiet confidence, even when conditions change. As the C-47 approaches Mackay, it does so within a system stretched by war, relying on human judgment, and operating without the technological safeguards that will later become standard. The aircraft is capable. The crew is competent. The mission is routine. What remains unseen is how narrow the margin has become. Aircraft, crew, environment, systems. The Baker's Creek accident cannot be understood through a single cause. It emerges instead from the interaction of capable components operating at the limits of their era. Aircraft, crew, environment, and systems each perform as designed. Yet together, they form a narrowing corridor in which error becomes possible. The aircraft, the Douglas C-47 is, by 1943 standards, a mature design. Its airframe is stable. Its flight characteristics are predictable. Powered by two Pratt & Whitney R1830 radial engines, it delivers consistent performance and tolerates adverse conditions better than most transports of its time. There are no known defects specific to this aircraft type that would predispose it to sudden failure in flight. Instrumentation is basic but functional. The cockpit provides airspeed, altitude, rate of climb or descent, compass heading, and engine parameters. What it does not provide is terrain awareness. There is no ground proximity warning, no radio altimeter. Altitude is measured above sea level, not above the ground below. Over uneven terrain, this distinction matters. Approach procedures rely on maintaining minimum safe altitudes until visual contact with the airfield is established. In clear conditions, this is straightforward. In low cloud and rain, it becomes dependent on precise navigation and disciplined altitude management. The crew, the pilots, are transport qualified, trained within a wartime system that prioritizes operational throughput. Their experience includes night flying and instrument reference, but not to the depth that will later define commercial aviation. Instrument approaches are procedural rather than precision-based. Judgment plays a central role. Fatigue is a constant background factor in wartime operations, though there is no evidence of acute impairment. More relevant is expectation. Crews accustomed to successful approaches into Mackay may anticipate breaking clear cloud at a familiar point. When reality diverges from expectation, the risk of descending too early increases. There is no indication of panic or confusion in the cockpit. The descent profile appears deliberate, controlled, and consistent with an intention to land. The environment. Baker's Creek lies inland from the Mackay coastline, where the terrain rises gently but persistently. The elevation change is modest, deceptive in its subtlety. There are no dramatic peaks that command attention, only ground that gradually encroaches on altitude margins. Weather on the night of the accident is characterized by low cloud, rain, and reduced visibility. These conditions flatten visual cues. The horizon disappears. Depth perception degrades. Without clear external references, pilots must rely entirely on instruments and procedural discipline. At night, in rain, over dark terrain, the visual system offers little help. The absence of ground lighting inland compounds the problem. The aircraft may be descending toward what appears, visually, to be empty space. The systems. Navigation aids available in 1943 are limited. Radio direction finding provides bearings, but not distance or vertical guidance. There is no standardized glide path, no automated warnings. The system assumes that pilots will maintain safe altitudes until visual confirmation is achieved. This assumption places responsibility squarely on human judgment. It leaves little room for error when conditions obscure the environment. The system does not fail in a technical sense. It simply does not protect against a specific class of risk. Controlled flight into terrain is not yet a recognized pattern. Without that conceptual framework, procedures are not designed to prevent it. Each flight depends on individual vigilance rather than systemic defense. By the time the Baker's Creek flight begins its descent, all elements are aligned. A reliable aircraft, a competent crew, an unforgiving night environment, a system that offers information but no safeguards. None of these factors alone is sufficient to cause an accident. Together, they create one. The accident. The descent toward Mackay begins without urgency. From altitude, the deadliest C-47 transitions into approach configuration gradually, engines throttled back to a steady setting, airspeed controlled, descent rate modest. The aircraft remains fully responsive. Nothing in its behavior suggests danger. The crew is not fighting the machine. They are guiding it. Outside, the weather closes in. Low cloud thickens as the aircraft descends. Rain reduces what little contrast the night provides. The coastline, normally a reliable reference, fails to appear. Inland, there are no lights, no landmarks. The darkness absorbs everything. The crew continues downward in stages, consistent with approach practices of the time. Altitude is checked against charts. Bearings are monitored. The assumption remains that visual contact with the ground or the aerodrome will be established shortly. This expectation shapes the next decision. At some point in the descent, the aircraft passes below the minimum altitude that would guarantee terrain clearance in that sector. There is no alarm to mark the moment, no sound, no vibration. The altimeter continues to unwind, obediently reporting height above sea level, not the rising ground beneath. The C-47 flies on. From the cockpit, the world beyond the windshield is a uniform darkness. Rain streaks across the glass. Cloud diffuses what little ambient light exists. The pilots have no visual indication that the ground is closer than expected. The aircraft is still under full control. The engines deliver steady power. Control surfaces respond normally. There is no evasive maneuver. Investigators will later note the absence of evidence suggesting last-second awareness. No sharp climb, no abrupt turn, no reduction in power. The flight path remains stable until impact. This consistency is significant. It indicates that the crew did not perceive an immediate threat. At Baker's Creek, the terrain rises to meet the aircraft. The initial contact is sudden and unforgiving. The aircraft strikes the ground while moving forward at approach speed. The structure absorbs the forces as designed until it cannot. The A-frame breaks apart along the path of impact. Motion stops within seconds. There is no in-flight fire, no explosion in the air. The accident is not visible from a distance. It happens low, fast, and out of sight, hidden by weather and darkness. When the aircraft fails to arrive at Mackay, concern builds slowly. Wartime operations normalize delays. Communication is limited. Only after search efforts begin does the scale of the loss emerge. 40 people are killed. In technical terms, the accident is simple: a serviceable aircraft flown into terrain during approach. In human terms, it is devastating. It represents the moment when expectation overrides uncertainty, when routine masks risk, and when a system offers no warning until it is too late. The flight never loses control. That is precisely why it ends. Investigation and impact. The search begins at first light. Rain has eased, but cloud remains low over the countryside west of Mackay. Ground parties move carefully through wet fields and scrub, guided by incomplete reports and rather than precise coordinates. There is no emergency locator beacon, no radar track to replay. The aircraft's last known position is an estimate, derived from schedule and expectation. When the wreckage is found near Baker's Creek, it is immediately clear there are no survivors. The aircraft lies broken along a shallow path of impact. The distribution of debris confirms what the absence of in-flight distress signals already suggests. The aircraft struck the ground under control. There is no evidence of a mid-air failure, no signs of catastrophic engine malfunction, no indication of fire before impact. The investigation begins under wartime constraints. In 1943, aircraft accident investigation is not yet a specialized science. There are no flight data recorders. Cockpit voice recording does not exist. Investigators rely on physical evidence, witness accounts, weather reports, and procedural reconstruction. Many records are incomplete. Some are classified. Others are never written down at all. The engines are examined first. Both show signs of power at impact. Propeller damage is consistent with rotation. Control surfaces, where they can be traced, show continuity. Nothing in the wreckage points to a sudden mechanical failure that would have forced the aircraft down. Attention turns to navigation and weather. Reports confirm low cloud and rain in the Mackay area at the time of the accident. Visibility is described as poor. Cloud base estimates vary, reflecting the imprecision of the era's meteorological observation. There is no definitive record of the exact conditions at the moment of descent, only a general picture of deterioration. Investigators map the terrain and the aircraft's likely flight path. The conclusion is unavoidable. The aircraft descended below a safe altitude before establishing visual reference. In modern terms, it is a textbook case of controlled flight into terrain. In 1943, the term does not yet exist. The official findings stop short of assigning direct blame. There is no suggestion of recklessness, no evidence of gross negligence. The crew followed practices that were accepted at the time. The system they operated within did not prohibit the decisions made. It permitted them. This ambiguity shapes the response. Because the cause is not mechanical, there is no component to redesign. Because the error is not singular, there is no individual to correct. The accident exposes a gap between procedure and reality, but offers no immediate technical fix. The impact, however, is profound. 40 service personnel are lost in a single non-combat accident. For Australia, it is the deadliest aviation disaster to date. In wartime, such losses are often absorbed quietly, folded into a broader narrative of sacrifice. Public attention is limited. Detailed reporting is restrained. Within the IAF, the accident prompts reflection rather than overhaul. Discussions begin about minimum altitudes, night approaches, and the limitations of visual descent in poor weather. These conversations are incremental. Change comes slowly. The Baker's Creek crash does not produce a dramatic reform in 1943. What it produces instead is a record, a case study that will later be re-examined as aviation understanding evolves. Its significance grows not in the moment, but in hindsight, as patterns emerge across similar accidents worldwide. At the time, it remains a tragedy without a clear solution. The Baker's Creek crash does not change aviation overnight. In 1943, the war continues to demand speed, flexibility, and acceptance of risk. Aircraft keep flying in marginal weather. Night operations remain routine. The tools available to pilots are the same ones they used before the accident. There is no immediate technological solution waiting in reserve. What changes is quieter. As the war progresses and then ends, aviation enters a period of reassessment. Accidents like Baker's Creek are revisited, not as isolated failures, but as part of a pattern. Investigators begin to recognize that some of the most lethal crashes share a common trait. The aircraft is functioning normally. The crew is in control. The environment is misunderstood. This realization reshapes how safety is defined. By the 1950s and 1960s, controlled flight into terrain becomes a recognized category of accident. Training evolves to emphasize strict adherence to minimum altitudes, instrument discipline, and the dangers of descending without confirmed visual reference. Procedures become less flexible by design, reducing reliance on expectation and experience alone. Technology follows. Radio altimeters provide height above ground, not just sea level. Approach aids grow more precise. Eventually, terrain awareness and warning systems are developed to do what 1940s aircraft could not: alert crews when the ground is rising faster than expected. Each of these advances addresses a vulnerability exposed by accidents like Baker's Creek. In Australia, the crash remains a quiet marker in aviation history. For decades, it receives limited public attention, overshadowed by wartime narratives and later disasters. Yet within the professional community, it stands as an early example of a problem that would claim thousands of lives worldwide before it was fully understood. The 40 people who died near Baker's Creek were not engaged in combat. They were not testing experimental aircraft or pushing performance limits. They were traveling on a routine flight in an aircraft trusted by its operators within the norms of the time. That is what gives the accident its lasting weight. Modern aviation is built on layers of defense, procedures, training, technology, designed to prevent precisely this kind of outcome. When those systems work, they do so invisibly. When they fail, history reminds us why they exist. The Baker's Creek crash offers no dramatic final image. There is no single moment of error that can be isolated and corrected. Instead, it leaves a quieter lesson that safety is not defined by capability alone, but by how well a system protects against the limits of human perception. In the dark, in the rain, over rising ground, the margin for error is small. Remembering that truth is part of the legacy.